All right, so quick review from our last lecture. We were talking about taxonomy, the father of taxonomy being Carolus Linnaeus. We said that he is the father of taxonomy for two reasons. One, he came up with a system of hierarchical classification where we have the taxa levels from domain down to species. And as you go from most inclusive to least inclusive, you are looking at more characteristics. So at the top level of domain, it's most inclusive, least specific, and then as you come down to species, you get least inclusive, most specific, and characteristic. So at that species level, you're looking at one thing, and that term species is used quite a bit in biology. We say organism, which can mean any living thing, or a species. And this definition of species can be quite confusing at times to some, because a species is an organism that is so closely related that it could breed to produce fertile offspring. And we'll discuss that fertile offspring part, because that's where it kind of makes that definition there a little hairy in terms of other organisms that exist but can't produce fertile offspring. So we wonder, are they really a true species or not? So we'll discuss that in class. So we looked at the taxa levels from domain, and there were three domains: the domain bacteria, the domain archaea, and the domain eukarya. And we said that the kingdoms in bacteria and archaea are still being worked out, but in the domain eukarya, we have these four kingdoms here, which would be Protista, Plantae, Fungi, and Animalia. So that is one thing that Linnaeus did for classification. The second thing he did for classification was this two-part naming system known as binomial nomenclature. And binomial nomenclature is when you assign each organism a two-part name, often referred to as the scientific name. And here you could see Homo sapiens as an example. Now, look at that scientific name. Just a few things that I'd like to point out to you and jot this down. If you are going to write a scientific name, what you must do is capitalize the genus name. So the genus name is the first name, so that would be Homo. You're going to capitalize the letter H. The second and third name, if one should exist, would be lowercase. So in this case, it won't be a capital S, it would be a lowercase s there. And I wanted to point that out and make that correction in the slide so you could see that, because often what students do when writing scientific names is they'll capitalize both names. So it's capital H-O-M-O for the genus name, and then a space, and then for the species name or specific epithet, it's going to be lowercase S-A-P-I-E-N-C-E. You could see this in our scientific name, Homo sapien, in the honeybee's scientific name, which would be Apis mellifera, in the housefly scientific name, Musca domestica, and then in the many scientific names of your trees, which you'll be writing or typing. So whether you write or type it, the genus name is always capitalized, the species name is always lowercase. If you write the scientific name, you're going to want to underline each of the words in the scientific name. If you type a scientific name, you italicize the name. Now, a scientific name in general is universal. So why on earth would biologists want to assign each organism a scientific name that is universally accepted? Well, think about the things that you call, like a tree, you might call it a red maple tree, or better yet, think of us as humans. We're referred to as humans, but we all have different common names. The person sitting next to you has a different common name, whether you're talking about John Smith or Sally Mae or some actress, Selena Gomez, I guess. They all have different common names. And the names of organisms can change from location to location, from one location here in the United States to another location, from state to state, from country to country. So common names can change among people. That's why scientists name this, assign each organism this universally accepted scientific name. Because no matter where we are in the world, scientifically we are called Homo sapien. But our common name may change. All right? So that's why we assign each organism this universally accepted name. The scientific name is Latin based. The first word represents the genus. The second word is the specific epithet, a species within a genus. Always italicized as the genus species Homo sapiens, and the genus may be abbreviated. So if you're writing a scientific document or a lab report, at first you might want to say Escherichia coli, but eventually you could abbreviate the genus name in the paper where you have capital E period and then coli to follow. And of course, coli would be lowercase c there. All right, so we look at classification and we classify organisms based on evolutionary characteristics. So let's talk about evolution a little bit. The father of evolution, of course, would be Charles Darwin. And we know that evolution, descent with modification, is driven by a process called natural selection. And evolution is a fundamental theory of biology in that we look at that common ancestor, biologically speaking, from which all other life forms have come from. So here's kind of what evolution driven by natural selection is. Here you see a deer, and you see some plants within the population exhibit the variation in leaf structure. So there you have pretty much all smooth, broad leaves, and then you have one with hairs on it. So what happens is, there you can see that the deer prefers a diet of smooth leaves over hairy leaves, and plants with the hairy leaves produce more than other plants in the population. So eventually what happens is, as the deer keeps on eating all those smooth leaves, they don't have time to reproduce. So you have these plants with hairy leaves that are reproducing. Well, the deer prefers those smooth leaves over the hairy leaves, but generations later, most plants within a population have hairy leaves, as smooth leaves are selected against. So eventually what happens is you start to weed out the smooth leaves, and the more dominant population in the group is those plants with the hairy leaves. So, organization within the biosphere. As we start to look at humans within the biosphere, and we went through some of this when we were talking about the hierarchical levels of classification, where we went from atom to molecule to cell, tissue, organ system, organism, population, community, ecosystem, and then the biosphere. So organization within the biosphere being the sphere of life. A population is, again, members of a species within an area, and then a community is a local collection of interacting populations, and communities belong to an ecosystem, which is a community plus its physical environment. So in an ecosystem, you have both the biotic, the living component, and the abiotic, non-living component. And we look at how chemicals are cycled and reused by organisms, and how energy flows from photosynthetic plants or autotrophic organisms to top predators, those organisms that would be more heterotrophic in nature. Here you can see the marine ecosystem known as a coral reef. Here you can see a very healthy coral reef, and then you could see 1975, coral death, 1985, some coral death with no fish present, 1995, coral bleaching with limited chance of recovery, and then in 2004, coral is black from sedimentation and bleaching is still evident. These are the tropical rainforests of our seas, and they are in a lot of danger due to humans altering the atmosphere, which of course then is leading to alterations within our oceans. Ocean acidification, leading to dead zones, leading to temperature changes in the ocean, which all have a great impact on coral. And if you should take marine science junior or senior year, you could study some of this. So, humans in the biosphere. Humans modify ecosystems. Humans have a negative impact on ecosystems, but I also like to throw out there that humans have positive impacts on ecosystems because in today's day and age, we know a lot more environmentally than we did back in the 1960s when the environmental movement started. So now we're trying to correct some of the things that we have done in our past, but we still have great lengths to go to kind of get our planet back on balance. And that's not going to happen overnight. It takes many years for such processes to kind of come into that balance, that homeostatic state, if you want to put it. So humans have a negative impact on ecosystems by destroying forests. That would be deforestation, or grasslands for agriculture, housing industry, etc., etc. They produce waste, contaminate air, water, soil. However, humans depend upon a healthy ecosystem for food, medicine, raw materials, and other processes. Biodiversity, you may know biodiversity as species diversity, the different variety of organisms on the planet, but there are actually different levels of biodiversity. You could have genetic diversity, you could have species diversity, you can have ecosystem diversity. So biodiversity is the zone of air, land, and water where organisms exist. That would be in the biosphere, and the abundance of species estimated about 15 million, the variability of their genes, and the ecosystems in which they live. So here you can see the genetic diversity and ecosystem diversity and the species diversity. Extinction is the death of the last member of a species, and there is estimated of 400 species per day that are lost worldwide. So, as you could see, some of these organisms we may not even know. So 15 million abundant species with an estimated 400 species per day lost worldwide. So this wraps up taxonomy, talks a little bit about evolution and natural selection, and talks about our role as humans in the biosphere. Our last kind of topic in this chapter is the scientific method. We'll go through that relatively quick through lecture, and then we'll focus on a scientific method lab. Have a great day.